Hey everybody, my name is Justin Tibbs. I'm the Chief Security Officer at ANM. I'm here with Colt, Garrett, and Phil, and we're going to let them introduce themselves here in a second, but we're going to have a great conversation about Reach Security today. And with that, I'll start with Phil, if you want to give your introduction.
Sure. Hey everyone, my name is Phil Wong, based out of Denver, Colorado, and I am our Director of Cybersecurity for ANM. My background is primarily in security operations and incident response.
Yeah. Garrett Hamilton, CEO and co-founder of Reach Security. Thanks for having us, Justin and Phil. Prior to Reach, I was responsible for a number of products at Palo Alto Networks.
And I'm Colt Blackmore. I'm the CTO at Reach Security, and my background is in threat research, data science, and core engineering.
Awesome. So I wanted to kind of start out just understanding how you guys came to like the genesis of Reach, like what drove that, and what were the ideas behind it, and then we can kind of dive into what you guys are focusing on.
Yeah, so I think there's really two ways to describe how we arrived at what we've built. I think more than anything, there's this North Star around seeing a problem in cybersecurity that just needed to be solved. And then of course there's a technical answer, a technical solution to that problem. So I'll let Colt kick it off with why he and I have been friends for 14 years, and we always talked about building companies together, why we decided to pick this problem to go and solve.
Well, I don't know that the answer is specifically technical. It's more like we spent a decade building threat detection products, and that meant that every time a product missed an attack, we would get called in to talk to those customers, right? So this happened hundreds of times over many years, and every time we went into one of these customers, we would find that maybe not the product we built, but some product that they already had, identity, network, endpoint, something was capable of preventing the attack that they were impacted by. The issue was that they weren't using it effectively enough. And so the impetus for Reach was, well, we should be able to create some kind of automation system that does that for you.
Yeah, and the idea there is it's not actually the customer's fault. And in fact, it's really not even the vendor's fault in the day. Vendors have built these incredibly technical solutions that solve real technical problems for customers. Any of the big vendors out there that you can think of that immediately jump to mind or here at this floor, they've built incredibly powerful solutions, but there's always been this gap between solving technical problems and usability. And I'm sure you see it throughout your tenure and everything you've done in your career. And so what we're arriving at more broadly in, call it the world of IT and security and beyond, is people are looking for these co-pilots, agents, things of that sort to really effectively manage products for them or manage tasks for them that maybe humans aren't the best people to actually go and figure out on their own, or best things to go figure out on their own. So that's the really impetus behind why we started Reach a few years ago. It didn't come from a market category being defined. It really came from experiences being at companies that had tens of thousands, in some cases over 100,000 customers that bought a lot of stuff, right?
Sure.
And needed to get more value out of it.
So what it sounds like to me is we're talking something along the lines of optimization, even adoption of technologies, right? I think that's something that my team has always kind of preached to our clients and working with our clients as well. You know, it's really big. It's not just about buying technologies. It's really how are you adopting these things? How are you actually using these things? My experience has primarily been working within large enterprise. And within large enterprise, there's, you have the actual budgets to buy a lot of these industry best technologies, but it doesn't mean they're all speaking together. It doesn't mean they're all optimized correctly. Is that the idea that you had around it as well?
Yeah, I think we're going down this path where we assume that buying a platform was the easy button to actually get value and rationalize value out of tools. But in some cases, these platforms have almost made things more complicated. When you had a point person owning a point product, it was very clear that product, the care and feeding, was associated with that person.
100%.
But now you have 7 people in one tool, because this tool does VM and detection and prevention and whatever it might be. And so it almost in some ways has become complicated, where it's not just the tools talking to one another from disparate vendors, but a single tool being used in a shared responsibility model, which is no different than what people are talking about in the cloud.
So along those lines, can just kind of give us some background on what you guys are doing at Reach today and kind of where you see that driving outcomes for clients.
So I'll start at the broadest level, our North Star and what we focus on, and I think it'd be great to get Colt's perspective on the technical delivery of this, because that's really what we believe, it's the fundamental shift that has to happen to fix what's typically a human challenge or a situation where people are throwing humans at it.
Right.
So our North Star as a company is to help organizations deliver the best possible security posture using the tools and capabilities they have today. That doesn't mean that there might not be gaps that couldn't be resolved, but you start at ground zero by rationalizing what's in place today, making sense of it, and then figuring out how to improve upon that, using what is sometimes referred to as like a threat-informed approach, using meaningful data on your organization versus taking a vendor's word for it or some type of assessment's word for it. That might be more of a best practice or something of that sort. So that's our North Star, and how we measure that success like permeates into how we measure our success, as in we actually track how much better off customers have improved their posture with their tools based on Reach's recommendation. So that's at a high level what our goal is and what we do for each of our customers that I work with, and what we have in our offering with ANM. But at a technical level, I think that's actually a really important piece of this, because you might think there's a bunch of humans or hamsters or services behind the SaaS product that's running, but that's actually fundamentally the problem. And so I'll throw it over to you to talk about what technology, Colt.
Yeah, you can't really do this just by throwing people at the problem, which is true for most interesting problems. Mm-hmm. There's a scalability challenge there. So, of course, we're doing things algorithmically. So that means plugging into sort of top to bottom the security and general data infrastructure of the companies that we serve, starting with identity, so something like Active Directory, because sort of the tip of the spear when it comes to security is people.
Right.
Of course, there are spammy threat actors that just try to attack anything that they can see, and they don't necessarily care about their targets, and preventing those attacks is important, but really, if we're putting ourselves in the attacker mindset, they don't see faceless companies, they see Mike in HR who controls payroll direct deposit and can divert paychecks so you can steal people's income, for example. Attackers have specific goals, and they have specific ways of trying to go about achieving those goals, right? So we start by taking in information about people. What is their job title? What's their department name? The management chain? All of this human context, so we can understand the particular kind of risk surface that they represent. And then we go and look at the actual attack data. So regardless of how well something like an email gateway or a firewall is being used, it still sees a whole bunch of stuff. That's a lot of data that we can pull in and operationalize, right? So if you've got a firewall forwarding attacks up to a cloud where they get sandboxed and you're generating forensic data, for example, you can break the attacks down into the 5 or 10 or 20 steps the attack would go through at a low level to achieve its goal. And then we can look at the products that are in place, and the data that we're looking at and the products that we're attempting to reach and reconfigure, they can be separate, right? So you can be looking at email data, forensics around email data, but using that data to drive changes at the network level with firewalls or on the endpoint, for example. So it's all about understanding, in the real world, what do the attacks look like, how do they work, who are they targeting, who do the attackers care about, and then going into the products that can protect people and tuning everything specifically for the kinds of threats that the company is facing.
And the tuning is based on how do I want to phrase this? I want to say it's kind of customized to that environment itself, based on the tools that client
Exactly.
has, and then what you're finding in the data.
Yeah, I mean, it can expand beyond that. Of course, it's possible to hypothesize, here's what you could do with a product you don't own today to help them figure out what they should go buy next. Okay. And you can do it in the opposite direction. You can identify products that they're paying a lot of money for and not actually getting value out of, and eliminate that spend.
Now, Colt, we talk about a lot here is the security at this point is a problem of scale.
Yeah.
You may have heard mention around this, the technical challenge is like, okay, we built a lot of technical products to solve these technical problems, and that's really great. But inevitably, where we run into the largest challenge is how do we scale those capabilities, but more so the humans that are scaling those capabilities. And so Colt uses phrasing like we, but solving that scale problem is not, again, like people on the back end. So what's the solution to the scale problem?
Well, like I said, it's algorithmic, right? So I don't want to play buzzword bingo, but it's AI-based, though not machine learning-based. So that distinction is important. The reason I draw it is because if you want to put those things in two broadly different categories, you could say that machine learning systems are statistical, so they're drawing inferences based on data and patterns. But you can also build reasoning systems that operate logically, so when they analyze data and make decisions, they're doing that in a very concrete way, in a very exacting way, not in a statistical way. Statistics can arrive at the same conclusions when they work out well, but they can also lead you very far astray.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that's fascinating, the differentiation there between, and I think that's important because, like you said, there's buzzword bingo, especially on this floor this year. Everything is AI, AI,
Yes.
AI, LLMs, AI. It's going to save the world. And I think you had a funny quote that I love, which you said, AI is just a tool.
Yeah. Just a tool to make you happy.
Just a tool to make you happy. That's what it was. I call it a t-shirt quote.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and I love that because I'm finding there's like a lot of abuse of the AI word, but and you gave a talk at B-Sides about
I did.
this topic potentially, right?
Can I say the name?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so the talk is called "Fuck Your AI Model," or "Fuck Your ML Model" specifically. So it was about all the other forms of AI that sometimes are quite similar to ML, but they work in fundamentally different ways and are much better at solving a lot of hard problems that ML is not particularly good at.
Well, I think we can use an example too. So there are applications of ML that have become quite useful that we've built in our past lives. So introducing a sandboxing technology helps. Certainly, there's very limited reverse engineers out there in the world, but helps those analysts and reverse engineers find the needle in the haystack. So
Right.
the ML and those capabilities, filter that out. Now, it's okay. It's not ideal, but it's okay to get some of those verdicts incorrect, which we've all dealt with, that false positives. And if you build the products, you've seen them. You've probably helped them on the operational side, right? Like we've created them on our side in some cases, but that's maybe the good examples. Like statistically, you can be very close to accurate with the right amount of care and feeding and attention on labeling and things of that sort. But when it comes to having to reason and understand how to configure security tooling or rationalize how tools are actually protecting an organization, you need to have a system that can do just that, can make sense of it, and then communicate why it thinks that. And that's where statistical inferences become a challenge, and why we think, square peg round hole, that type of thing that's happening right now in the market.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, shout out to his talk. I hope you beep that part of his talk, because that would be fantastic. No, now I'm going to blur out his mouth.
Don't beep it.
That'd be amazing.
Oh, well, yeah,
Blur out his mouth.
No,
Yeah.
we're not.
blur out my whole
That'd be
face.
amazing. That'd be amazing.
We're not beeping. We're gonna do the witness protection black shadow. So
You know, like the voice modulator.
voice
Yeah,
modulation,
right.
everything.
Yeah.
We got you.
All of a sudden,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Interesting enough, I was gonna to dive into this more so for people maybe catch this is as you guys are working through expanding the Reach platform and developing kind of the I'm gonna call it the telemetry feeds that come in and how you algorithmically, I can't talk today, give me categorization or risk clarification, all that fun stuff. How do you have kind of a high level approach on how you derive some of that risk data for a client? Let's say that I'm company A and I want to see a POC of your platform, and you say you're taking my identity data. What specifically do you correlate at a high level to be able to tell me specifically in my environment, what the high risks are?
Yeah, so it's a combination of the nature of the target.
Okay.
So I would say most security organizations know enough at least to pay special attention to executive teams.
Right.
They have a fair amount of power, or not even the teams directly, but often the executive assistants who control executive email, for example. And that generally means the CEO and the CFO in particular, right? They're going to be targeted. So you can understand the privileged role that they occupy, the things that an attacker could do with access to that. So that's going to help guide our sense of the risk there. But then also, what is the nature of the attack, right? If it's phishing, credential phishing, but it's trying to steal somebody's personal banking login or their Netflix login, how much do we care about that versus if it's their G Suite or Office 365 login, right? There's a very big delta there, and the level of risk that represents. And I mean, all malware is bad, of course, but it's a similar thing with malware. You have crypto miners, which are just going to burn some CPU cycles to get some Bitcoin, but it's not the end of the world for somebody who gets popped that way, right? Ransomware is worse, depending on how bad it penetrates into a network, can be very bad. So there are some things to think through there. But then you also have things like persistent backdoors, which are trying to maintain access over long periods of time for an attacker who might be interested in intellectual property theft, or just something that is on a longer time scale much, much worse for a company. So we're going to rate those things higher. We also care about how widely distributed attacks are. So is it a specific person being targeted? Is it a specific company, a number of people in the company? Or is it just every person on every marketing team, on every company that an attacker can find because they're scraping these things out of the internet?
Okay.
The level of targetedness is also important to consider for risk.
Okay. And so ingesting that data, you guys are not just accepting the truth from like a firewall, you're bringing it into kind of your own normalization
We do. We don't consider it to be our job to second guess the products we integrate with, but we have spent a decade building these products. We find lots of false positives and false negatives in the data we review, and so we do implement heuristics to try to clean up the sometimes messy vendor data.
Fair enough.